Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make Lenn's hat from Gale online. If you guys are new to my channel, I am Muku Sweet. I make videos of cosplay tutorials, makeup tutorials, and some fashion DIYs. Well, further ado, let's get started with this tutorial. So here are the pieces you're going to need to make the hat. So these already have seam allowance added to them. I'm actually going to start making the stripe that she has on her top part of the hat. I'm going to have to make a new pattern for this. The diameter is about 14 1/4. I cut 2 of them out, but then with this one, I fold into 4 in half, and then fold a half again. And then you'll do the radius. I did a radius of 3 1/2. It depends on the measurement of your head, like where you want it to rest. So you take the head measurement and then you find the radius, cut it out. So like from that point you start the radius amount. So I just went around and then I just trimmed this part off. And this should rest on my head nicely, but also going to add a band to it. The band is the same thing, the circumference of my head, but this is half because I'm gonna cut this unfold. This is for the brim of the hat. I just use a hat that I have that's kind of like what I wanted, the shape. I just took some fabric and I just laid it like just straight on top, traced the outline of where it ends on each side. It took about maybe 3/4 off because I want it shorter. It's 1/2 inch shorter. I made it to a pattern piece and add seam allowance all around. For the earpiece, play this around a lot, and this is the shape that I like. If you guys are wondering how long the ears are, they are 8 inches long. And from the base right here, about 2 1/2. And this is also added seam allowance, and for this one the seam allowance is 1/4. For the headband, I made it 2 inches. So this is going to be cut on fold. I add seam allowance on the end because I'm going to sew them together to make a circle, and I'm going to be cutting 2. So for the top part of her hat, the stripe is on the left side. I am just going to determine how much I want the strip to be, which is an 1.5 inch width. To make this a lot easier is to draw a line here and a line here, dividing this circle into 4, so we can make sure that this stripe will be straight. It doesn't have to be exactly in the middle, we just need a line as a guidance. By looking where I place, where I make my I guess prototype. So the middle is right here. I'll say 1.5 inches away from the middle. Just right there. Just gonna draw my line. And then move over 1.5 inches. My stripe will be right there. I think I might want to go out a little bit more. No, actually it's gonna be 2 inches. 2 inches away from the middle. Let's hope it's right. I'm just going to move over 2 inches. So my new line will be right here. So ignore that. And then just add 1/2 inch. So now I'm just going to cut this out. So now I have 3 pieces. And all you gotta do is just add seam allowance to the end of it. To this side right here. Don't worry right here, because this is already added seam allowance like I said before. I made the pattern ahead because I was making some bow ties, and this is what I came to. 1/2 inch seam allowance here, 1/2 inch seam allowance here too, and this one just that side. So it looks like this. So I add stripes to the side where the seam allowance is, so you guys won't get confused. And I'm also going to label which piece, like what color each pattern I'm supposed to go to. The top part of the hat is complete, the pattern piece. So next, we have to do the stripe part for the ear. So I'm just moving this just to see where I want it to be. This doesn't have to be straight in the middle, but as long as it's enough room for that 1.5 inches. I like it how it's right here. And then go over 1/2 inch. Just gonna do exactly what I did with the top part of the hat. Cut those out and add seam allowance. Since I use 1/4 seam allowance, I'm gonna use 1/4 too, just to keep it all together the same amount. Also, if you guys are wondering how I add the seam allowance, it's pretty simple. I take some extra paper, I tape it, and then where it stops, I just put my ruler down to 1/2 inch and just draw a line. And then I just cut it out and put more tape on the top so it won't go anywhere. Forgot to mention for the headband part, you're also going to add seam allowance here, so all the way around except for this part where you're going to put on fold. So for the headband, you cut 2, and also don't forget to cut 2 pieces with the ear. So you have one, just one piece, and another one, that's where you divide it right here. And you're going to cut 2 pieces. And then for these, you're also going to cut 2 for each. So you have the cap rim thing, we're going to cut 2. Now for these pieces, you're going to cut 1, this one 2, and this one. So what I'm using for the white stripe is some white fleece. Mine is not the same as my pink fabric, which is this rayon polyester type of fabric. I decided to give it a little bit more texture. No, this is flannel. Yes, this is white flannel, not fleece. It's pretty lightweight, so it's not heavy, and even like when you have it doubled, it's not too bulky. So we're gonna cut 1 of this and 2 of this. I'm gonna start with sewing the stuff connecting like the ears together and the top of the hat together. Also, be careful with your fabric, knowing the right side from the wrong side, because sometimes fabrics can look the same on both sides, like mine's. The back is actually a little bit more smaller loops or thread thingy than the right side. With flannel, it's actually pretty easy to distinguish since that's the wrong side and this is the right side. The right side has more fluff to it. So taking my white piece, we're just going to flip it. So this is the right side, and flip it over like this, and then pin in place. And then we're just gonna stitch 1/2 inch. Now we're just going to sew the other part. I'm going to press it out like this, so just going one direction. Nicely pressed. So next I'm going to top stitch the seam. I did a little test. So this side is with the top stitching on both sides of the seam. I also trimmed the seam right here that's close to the top stitching. And with the top stitching, I did 1/8 of an inch away from the seam from both sides. So you don't have to do this if you don't want to, if you don't want the look, but I really like that nice top stitching. With the ears, you have to do both sides separately. And then we're gonna pin. Gonna sew this. So remember that this is 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is how it looks like when it's sewn together. Now, just do the same thing to the other side here. So I had to make a new pattern piece for this ring. I forgot there's just going to be a white strip that continue onto it. Take my pattern piece for the top part of the hat and line it up. So I fold back my seam allowance so it stops right there. Just ignore these lines. Taking another side piece right here, I'm just going to do the same thing. So I'm going to mark right here to where it ends, and then I'll just draw a line. So it's not exactly 1.5 inches. So to equalize it, I think it's about 1/4 of an inch difference. I'm just going to bring out 1/8 to one side, another one has 1/8 too. Going back with my other pattern, just trying to see if it will line up, and surprisingly, it is. Okay, so this part is slightly larger. I think it should work. Alright, so now that we have our piece, we're gonna add seam allowance to each side. So seam allowance here, 1/2 inch, and both sides of this piece and this side. To let you guys know, this is, when you look at this pattern, this is actually the wrong side of the fabric. I did this before and I messed up. So when I cut my fabric, I had this laying as the right side. So when I did that and I tried to line it up with this piece, it ended up being flipping the stripe to the right side. If you were to sew this would be the right side of the fabric. So we flip it. I added my seam allowance. Oh, also, this is also seam allowance included on the outside and inside. The pieces are cut out. Now I'm just gonna sew these together. It should look something like this. There's like extra fabric right here. You can like easily just trim that off. What we're gonna do next is do the top stitching. So after doing the top stitches, now we're just gonna trim the seams. We're gonna trim it all the way to as close as you can to the stitches. Now I'm gonna sew the top part to this piece. So this is the right side, and this is the right side of this part. Moving on to the other part of the hat, I'm gonna cut 2 interfacing of each of these patterns. I also have like a very heavy interface that is not adhesive. Just going to give it more structure to the hat. One piece for both of them. So I got all my interfacing pieces. For the interface that it's not adhesive, I didn't have enough to do a full band, so I had to cut out 2 pieces of like the one, like just the regular pattern piece unfold, and cut 2. And what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to glue these together with super glue and just make a circle out of it. These 2 we're going to use these later. So now we're just going to interface our pieces. So this is the right side. You want the bumpy part to be on the wrong side. I'm gonna put like 1 pin so I know that it should be pressed like this. So now you're gonna fuse all of these pieces. I have the 2 right sides together. Now I'm just going to sew this curve right here. Just this side. Just gonna clip the ends. We're gonna cut to the thread but not over. Sorry, trim the seam right here and I pressed it down. So next I'm going to trim the other interfacing. First, just trace out the shape right here so it can fit nicely at the bottom. Now I'm going to try it out, see if it fits. So it looks nice. I'm going to trim the extra right here and also another 1/2 inch because I don't want this to be in the seam while I'm sewing. And then I'm gonna do half of it. That's why you just cut this off too. For our band. So for both of them, you're going to sew the ends together. So you sew them together and I press the seam out. Now we're going to put the right sides together of the band. So lining up the seam to seam. And I pin this down first so I know that I want this to line up. Then we're going to fold this in half and find the center. So this is going to be the back and we are going to pin this. Taking the brim, I marked the center too. This is the front and this is the back. So I have the seam of the inside onto the back side here so it won't show in the front. Line this one with the center on the band and we're going to flip this inside out in between both of these bands. The center matches the center and pin in place. Now we're going to sew this down. When you flip it out, you have the right side of the brim out in the front, and on the back is where that seam allowance is. It will look like this. Now we're just gonna press, and then I'm gonna do top stitching at the edge of the band. Top stitching came out really good. So now we're going to put in our interfacing. I'm going to line this up right where the top stitching is. Whatever left over here and add the 1/2 inch seam allowance, we're going to trim it off. It's still a little bit too high up into the seam allowance, so I'm gonna trim off maybe 1/4. Okay, so that's about exactly 1/2 inch away from the edge. So now I'm just going to glue this together with some super glue. Before I cut out the pattern for the top part of the hat, I made another circle, and this is going to be the lining. And so for the lining, we're going to split this into 2 pieces, so in half, and then we're going to add seam allowance at the edge. So remember, this is already have seam allowance included, so I just have to add to the other side so we can have a seam. Your lining pattern should look something like this. So you're going to cut 2. So the lining I'm going to be using for my hat is this pink one. I got 1/2 yard, but that's more than enough. I'm gonna lay my lining pattern on the fold pin, and we're just gonna cut 2 out. You're going to sew up to this much, maybe leaving a 1/3 open in the middle, so I can turn inside my hat, right sides together, here to here, and here to here, leaving this open. You're also gonna need a lining piece. That's the ring of the hat, and this is cotton fold, so you only need to cut 1. So for the earpiece, so the only thing that's been sewn together is the top part and the ring part. Now we have to attach our ears. So one of the ears, I already put in the wires. What I did with this one is actually put 2 pieces of wire. So I took a piece of wire and kind of traced the shape of it, then I cut another one, and I have 2 of them in there. So I put that into the ear before the stuffing so it would stay in place. So with the wire, I can actually move my, manipulate the ears however I want it. So if I want like this, or if I want to go up, or pull the tip of the ear just back a little bit or something, I can do that. I took out 1 inch of the seam right here, seam ripping it. When I attach this to the hat, I'm going to make a slip, and then I'm going to sew these down out like this onto the hat so it stay up. We're going to work with this ear. I already marked down 1 inch, and now I'm just going to seam rip all the way to that point. Doing this would shorten the ears. I was playing around with it on the hat and it was kind of a little bit too long, so it kind of works out. Taking some wire. I got these wire from Joann and it's 8 yards for about $3-4. And the type of wire this is pretty it's kind of thick. It's not the really thin one for like earrings. When you bend it, it'll stay in shape and it doesn't break. And kind of trace out the shape so you know how much I need. But then I gave myself just a little extra. So I got my 2 pieces of wire. And then you want to separate them. So 2 to the side, 2 to the other side. You might want to hold them out so it can stay onto the seam and to start stuffing it. So now you have your ear. I already pinned where I want my ear to be. I'm going to use my ruler and line this up to the other side. And I'm just going to mark. I'm going to measure how wide this is right here, where I stop the seam ripping, and it's about 3 inches. I want to have this opening just a little bit slightly under 3 inches, so I'm going to make it about 2 3/4. Since it's a 1/4 difference, 1/8 on each side, be right here. I'm gonna seam rip from this top stitch to the top stitch right here on the white part. And make sure you're not seam ripping the other fabric. That top stitch is gonna act kind of like a little stay stitch. And let's see, hopefully this would go through. It's not gonna line up if I do that, so I have to go in more. I'm gonna go over another one. Well, I'm just gonna cut all the way to across the white fabric. Okay, it looks a little bit better. I'm going to have to cut a little bit more. So it's looking good. I just have to space it out just a little bit to make it line up. I'm going to try to stitch this down. It's gonna be really tiny, so maybe like 1/4 or 1/8 as seam allowance. So I pinned it all, like one on this side and then there, so it'll be like a rectangle. I'm going to take my hand sewing needle and some thread, and we're going to hand stitch this in place. I have the thread on double. Okay, I'm going to start right here and just going to do some basic simple hand stitching. I'm going to be using small like stitch. Get the first ear down and it's staying up pretty nice with the wires. I'm going to use hot glue. And I'm just going to hot glue down this to one of the seam right here. It's probably going to be the out one. And then I'll use the inseam and I'm just going to sew that down so the stuffing won't come out. I already sewn down this part right here. So it's left with this one of the hat. I'm just going to twist these wires together. So 2 to one side and 2 to the other side. So twist these wires together, do a casing using the other seam allowance. I want to like cast it over here, and I'm going to put glue in between where the stitch is, not over it. It won't show onto the hat, so you can highlight the sharp edge of the wire. And that was the last step for doing one of the ears. Now I'm just going to do the exact same steps to the ear. When you are making a slip right here, you want to add some tacks on the corners so it wouldn't fray out the fabric. Also with the ear, when you're seam ripping it, you want to go back and do some tacking too. I didn't do any of those steps, and then I started sewing the ears onto the hat, and then the seam was like ripping further and further out, and I had to stop sewing, took the ear out, and then I had to go and do some more stitches to reinforce the seams. I got my other ear sewn on. So I flipped this the wrong side and I marked 5/8 away from like the edge of the band. So I have decided I'm not going to have any of the band showing, because in her hat there's none showing except for the cap brim. I'm going to be sewing at right here 1/8 away from the band. There's a chance you can see it because I need something to catch on right here, and if I were to sew 1/2 inch, it would be nothing catching. Now we're going to finally do sewing the hat all together. I'm gonna flip this in half and find the center and the back center. So this is the front, center, back. So you're gonna flip this inside out. This is also inside out. On the inside out, the flipping the wrong side of it out, not inside. You know what I mean. We're also gonna find the center front. Center back is already marked because it's the same. We're gonna line this up. So I'm taking the edge of this part of the hat and lining up with the blue marking. So with the lining, I forgot I took in an inch for the hat. So I'm gonna mark an inch all the way around so I know where to sew. I'm gonna sew these together just like just exactly what we did with the hat. So I already pinned the hat to the band. Next, we're going to put the lining in. And lining is also inside out. And then once you pin, you just stitch it together. Okay, so I sew the lining and everything all together. Now we're just gonna turn it inside out. Great, I sewed the lining wrong. I just got done turning in my hat inside out. I mean the right side out. Apparently I did the lining wrong, so the raw edges are out instead of inside, and the top of the cap too. So this is supposed to be at the bottom, like inside. This is supposed to be inside. So if you're making this hat, the only thing you should flip inside out, having the wrong side out, is just the top part of the hat. The band with the cap and lining should be the right side out and the wrong side in. Yeah, I would go back and rearrange it again, but it was actually really difficult to sew through all of these layers together. I even switched out my needle to like a heavy duty needle, and I was still having problems with it. It took me about like 15 minutes just to go around a circle. What I'm just gonna do is actually just serge this and part of this too, and just give it a nice clean edge to it, since I don't want to go back and redo this. So that's what I'm gonna do. Serge all this around. But that's okay, nobody will see it. Once I put some stuffing in the hat, I'll just serge it closed. Put some stuffing here, just a little bit, not too much, because the wig I'm wearing is actually pretty bulky. Like, it gives it volume to the hat too, so just a little bit of stuffing would do, like in the side. And I'm not going to put any in the center of the hat. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Here's a sneak peek of an upcoming video, which is Lenn's jacket. If you guys still haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button for upcoming videos. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.